You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 298th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 955th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of July 6th, 2023. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
The shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
I started the day with very little idea of what the banner moment would be, but as so often has been the case, Calbert Chaney comes to the rescue for everyone and held immediate availability today about his new role with the program, and just a great chance to see him in IU gear. Is always exciting for folks who grew up with him like Jared and I did, and had some interesting things to say, about his role, about what brought him back to Bloomington, and really said one of the questions was essentially what the determining factor was, and he said Woody was his answer, and so great to see his excitement about the program that Woody's building. Had great things to say about the staff, and jokingly talked about being with Holes and Woodson as the three IU guys, and made sure to note that both of those guys would admit that he's the better player. So always good to hear that, and had some interesting things to say about this year's team. Talked about one of the questions asked him about his time with the 2013 team, and he said he sees a lot of the same abilities and that there's a lot of potential on this team, and even referenced they have the potential to be better than last year's IU team if things come together well. And I think that's one of the areas that he comes in trying to handle that, and talked about his goal really to help the players be successful, and excited about how some aspects of this role have changed over time, and that he gets to work a bit more directly with the players on court. And as he talks about, the head and the heart determining success, and those things, I just was, excited to see him back in that role, and even had an interesting anecdote about Woodson going through, talking to him when he was going through a little bit of a tough time at the beginning of his junior year. Had played a lot of basketball in the summer for I think the World University Games. He referenced and had a talk with Woodson, said their relationship just really bloomed from there. So it feels like all around a good fit, great ambassador for the program, and a guy that we're all excited to see work with these players and see what he can pass along, but certainly seems to be passionate about the opportunity and excited about it. And I think I speak for all IU fans. We say we're glad to have him. So welcome back, Calbert, once again. And it was great to see the media availability of him today, and look forward to what he's going to do with the team and the program. With that, let me introduce my co-host for this week. Jared is taking the week off, although I will note that he did put out a podcast with Damon Bruce earlier today. I've listened to probably the first 20 minutes and got some insight on kind of how Trace is going to fit with the Warriors from Damon, who's in the Bay Area. So I would encourage everybody to listen to that, not just because Damon said that he often gets my theme music in his head, which Bob Thompson, I know, on Twitter took as a real compliment, as being able to get a song in somebody's head is a great compliment to a musician. So good stuff from that so far. Looking forward to the rest of it as they get into some other things related to IU. So would encourage everybody to listen to that if you're missing Jared's voice this week. But I do have with me a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of Delphi Bracketology, and a man who has declared that he will only go over to Threads if the Indiana account promises to post off-season hype and workout videos there. He is...
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, what's on your mind this week?
Not a whole lot. Interesting to see the schedule come out, the non-conference schedule come out in the last couple of weeks. Since I've been on, the draft occurred, and it's good to see Indiana represented in the draft, and watching those young men now start their summer league and their quest to play in the NBA, and then just to know, guys, that the players are working to get better for next year, and we have a lot of hope, and we have a lot of also questions of how all of this is going to fit together. And that they're in the gym working, and they're using Cook Hall and their personal basketball trainers and all of that stuff to get shots up and to get better. And as time passes, then we get to see them here in about 2 or 3 months when practice starts. So not a whole lot of knowledge, but a lot of speculation, and that's not bad sometimes during the summer.
Absolutely. And also here with us is a senior writer for The Big Lead, a freelance shot doctor, still looking for his first client, and a man who has started asking people to refer to him as the Shohei Ohtani of online content, to which we say, no, I would have preferred this were written as the Ellie De La Cruz of online content, but that's just me.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, I don't know that there's anything to rant about, certainly not in the world of IU basketball, so you can feel free to rant about other things or just give us your thoughts on anything going on in the Hoosiers.
Well, first of all, if you're going to refer to me as the Ellie De La Cruz of online content, I don't need a performance-enhancing cap on my bat, but I will use one if necessary from time to time. So just to get that out there, don't need it. But I mean, if it
don't let Dave Martinez find out about it.
Gives me an advantage. Why not? Why not? There's no one testing for anything here. I think it was great to watch Jalen Hood-Schifino play a little summer league ball for the Lakers out here. He looked kind of tight in the first game in the first half. I think it was pretty expected for a young guy, after his freshman year, playing in the league and in the summer league. I mean, and it seemed that he got real comfortable in the second half and looked pretty good in that first game. And I thought he looked better in the second game. Also facing off against old friend Chase Audige in the opener, worth noting, who knocked down, of course, because he was playing an IU guy, knocked down 4 of 7 threes and wound up with 18 points in like 20 minutes. But fitting. Just fitting.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see.
I'm sure they were all really quality shots too. I'm sure none of them was like falling backwards or into the bench or something when he knocked him in.
But I liked watching Jalen play, and he took too many shots. He still hasn't hit a 3 yet in summer league, but that'll come. Again, the 3-point line's longer in the NBA, and he's so good at the mid range. He's really going to need to work to get to that next level. But I really like the guys around him, and I think the guys that will be with him. I assume Jalen's going to start in the G League, just given how deep the Lakers are at guard right now, and they added Gabe Vincent, so the second unit is not going to be his. Gabe Vincent's going to get that. I'd assume he starts in the G League, and hopefully maybe by halfway through the year he's getting some reps. But he's surrounded by guys like Colin Castleton was a really nice player at Florida as a big man who can run the floor and stuff. I think that'll be a good guy. A big man who can move will be a good pair with Jalen. Cole Swider's a nice 3-point shooter. Maxwell Lewis is a good, athletic guy off the wing. Max Christie, I think, is going to make the Lakers roster. But even if not, that's a nice backcourt mate to play with, for the rest of summer league and potentially in the G League a little bit too. So I like the guys around him to help him get better. I think that sort of secondary roster of the Lakers fits him well. And the thing with Jalen is he always needed time to develop. He did. There was more development to do there. You saw him get better over his freshman year, but he wasn't an NBA point guard at the end of his freshman year. He had the size, he has the instincts and all of that, but there's areas of his game he needs to iron out before he's ready to take on that responsibility. Now, if he were on the Spurs where they don't care about winning, he'd probably be in the NBA this year, but he got drafted by a Lakers team that's going to try and compete for the Western Conference. So it'll likely be that he'll get less playing time. But he's also with a franchise that's really good at developing players and making players better. Look no further than Austin Reeves, who was an undrafted free agent and just got $50 million. So I think it's a good spot for him, and I think I like the guys around him to help him develop. If it's not going to be with the superstars, it's good that it's a nice mix of players that fit his game well.
All right. Appreciate the Lakers talk here. Luckily, we have Ryan as our West Coast correspondent for just this, just such an occasion as we move forward with Jalen out there. So we'll talk about him a little bit more in a second. But this week on the Assembly Call, we got a few things coming up. We'll hit some Hoosier headlines, a lot of which has to do with Hoosiers in the NBA. Then segment 2, we'll do our offseason breakdown of CJ Gunn. And in segment 3, we'll answer a few of your questions with our mailbag. So all of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
And this edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where you'll find they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel anywhere, with beloved logos like 2 different versions of the Bison, this fine IU women's Big Ten Champ shirt that I'm wearing right now, and pretty much anything else you could think of from an IU perspective. And even if you're not an IU fan, or if you have people in your life who like people other than IU, they have something unique for fans and grads of pretty much every school. Vintage logos, great designs, and comfortable shirts, sweatshirts, anything you need. So no matter what you buy, you know it'll be comfortable and the colors will last through many washings. Plus, you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through the Kelly School of Business. And what can be better than that? They continue to roll out new schools. I believe today was UT Chattanooga came out. They've got refreshes for a number of schools coming up. I believe this weekend is Notre Dame and Penn State. You can find out about all of that by signing up for their email alerts for different things. You can go to homefieldapparel.com, though, and use promo code HOME to get 15% off of your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME for 15% off. Once again, the website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Mentioned we had a text last weekend. Coach has become a professional concert goer in the offseason, and so
That he has.
sends us a picture of himself with a fan of the show wearing a "Let's Go P" Austin P shirt, and as I said, Coach mingling with his people, wearing home field apparel is summer.
Summer's all about.
Summer at its finest. Absolutely.
If home field apparel wants to corner a San Diego market, they should do a "We don't need a conference" San Diego State shirt, because apparently they won't have a conference next year. Whoops.
Yeah. Maybe a slight miscalculation on there. But we'll see how that
just a little bit. The lawyers are going to make so much money on that one. Yeah.
All right. Hoosier headlines. So, like I said, mostly NBA stuff at this point. Talked about Jalen, the Lakers. They're 0-2 in the Summer League. He's playing point guard. I think was a bit more efficient in the second game. I believe had 20 points in that game. Handful of rebounds, few assists. So Ryan broke that down pretty well. As Jared put it here, it's about what you'd expect. Kind of uneven. Shows some flashes of getting to the rim. Showed some improvement from game 1 to game 2, just getting a little more comfortable. I think a lot of that is nerves, as Ryan mentioned, but a decent start for him as he works his way to the next level. You've got Trace signed a 4-year deal with the Warriors, including 2 years guaranteed. Missed the first couple games with a hamstring injury, but I believe is expected to make his debut this weekend. And in other player news, Victor goes to Oklahoma City. OG still in Toronto, but is a potential trade candidate there. Thomas Bryant goes to Miami. Cody Zeller leaves Miami, goes to New Orleans. Eric Gordon signs with the Suns. And Romeo Langford, San Antonio declined to extend him a qualifying offer, so he is officially a free agent. I know Rick Bozich had something written up about that earlier today as I kind of look forward to what's next with him. But Coach, I'm not sure if you watched much Summer League. Any takes on any of the transactions that really stood out to you from an IU form or alumni perspective?
Yeah, a couple. Very happy with where Trace Jackson Davis landed. And I know there was some talk after the draft about being disappointed that he, quote, fell from where everyone thought. Well, this is a young man who for a couple of years wasn't even going to get drafted. And he went back and worked on his game and got it to a level where some teams in the NBA would appreciate. And Golden State traded back to get into him. So the third or fourth last pick, it doesn't matter. When you look at some of the bigs that weren't picked in Sheway, Timmy, Sonogo from UConn, the post play is just intriguing in the league, and that's filtering down to the college game. That's part of. Jared asked a really good question about that came up from last week's show about Mbako at the 4 or the 3, and all of those are traditional basketball things. But the game's trending smaller and athletic at every spot. Not so much at the guard spot, but at the bigs. You're not looking for your 7-2 post-up guys anymore. So very pleased that Trace came back, gave a lot to Indiana, come back a couple years, has put Indiana back to the path of where Indiana basketball belongs. And for him to get drafted, I think that was just outstanding. And the one, again, I'm not huge into the league until playoffs, but I love the way Miami plays, and I think Spoelstra is just a great coach. And I know they came up short in the NBA championship, but to see Thomas Bryant go there, it'll be interesting to see what kind of role he can, create or find with Miami, if any. But I do kind of like that. And the older guys, you just hope they can find a spot where they can play and win. But Thomas Bryant to Miami was the one that caught my eye. I'd like to see him continue to do well in the league.
Heat culture.
Yep. Ryan, what about you? Any of those transactions kind of stand out as a particularly good fit or particularly intriguing to you?
I'm looking very much forward to seeing Trace. I think he debuts Friday, right? He debuts tomorrow night, right? With the Warriors. I think
that's the thought. If he's good enough to go, that it would be tomorrow.
Yeah, I look forward to that fit, and the fact that they gave him that 4-year deal, it's a 2-year guaranteed, so it's a 2-year deal. Let's be real, but the fact that they're going to roster him. He's not a G League guy. They drafted him to play him. And you're right about that, Coach. He fell, quote unquote, and he did. We all had him projected in the 30s. Some people had him in the back of the first round, but I didn't talk to anybody in the NBA who thought that was going to happen. They thought he would be somebody early in the first round that, a non-playoff team might get to sort of wrangle their young guys a little bit and be the mature rookie. And other people said, well, no, somebody will trade up to the early 30s if they really want him. And he just kept falling. And I texted you guys. I said, man, this is starting to feel like – because once you get into that 40, 45 range, all those teams back there are playoff teams that typically go high upside. They don't go for established talent. They go for the guy from Europe that can jump out of the gym. I mean, because they already have a full roster. If they're in the playoffs, they're usually in the playoff hunt. They usually have a full roster. They have the 8 guys they run with. And then they try and, shoot the moon with somebody on the back end. And, it didn't look good. And all of a sudden when I saw there was a trade up, I was like, oh, please have this be for Trace. And it was the Warriors. And that's a fit. It's a fit because they like mature players. The Warriors have always liked mature players. So also the idea that guy's going to be on the roster practicing against those guys, and who's somebody that a lot of people compared him to was Draymond Green. Was like, his path to success is kind of like what Draymond, just do everything. Do a little bit of everything. You don't have to shoot the ball out. You don't have to shoot the lights out. Play hard, play smart. He's not the defender Draymond is the ability to play out on the floor and all that stuff. He might get there, but he's not there. But that's the guy you got to model against. Be a good passer. Get rebounds. Run the floor. Carve out. Be a tough guy. Carve out in the post. Those things are what he has to mimic. It kind of do everything if you're undersized at that position. So it's great that that's the fit. Now, hopefully Draymond likes him, because Draymond will ice people out if he doesn't like him. But I think that there might be a case where he sees a lot of himself in Trace and maybe can be a light version of him and see what he can do. But I think it's a great fit. The way the Warriors run their offense up and down, he'll do a lot, be in the pick and roll a lot, getting to go to the hoop, just be a hustler, a backside shot blocker, a rebounder, and then run the floor. And they will get you the ball if you're on the court.
Yeah, that was one of the things that in the first part of the Damon Bruce interview that stood out, and you mentioned it, Ryan, was maturity. That's something that the Warriors clearly value. Yeah. And
look at the guys they've drafted. I mean, you look at the guys they've drafted. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
But
you're not sorry.
Look at the guys they've drafted that haven't been successful there. It's James Weissman was super young. He was the number 2 pick. It just didn't work out because those guys expect more than an immature kid. Jonathan Kuminga, all potential, young, hasn't really found his spot there. Jordan Poole, regardless of his age, was wildly immature on and off the court. They don't like those guys in that locker room. They really don't. They want guys who are going to step in ready to help them compete for a championship, not guys who are going to have to be shown the way to act like a veteran. And Trey, if anybody in this draft knew how to act like a veteran, Trace Jackson-Davis has been doing that since he was a sophomore. So, I do think it's a great fit personality-wise and all of that. I think it'll be great.
Yeah, that was one of the things they talked about is, with Wiseman and Kuminga, both raw, hadn't seen as many situations as, Trace has seen on the basketball court and some of those kinds of things. So, all you can really ask at that point is that you get yourself in a good position to get the chance to succeed. And it certainly seems like they intend to give him that chance. And so certainly look forward to him, getting over this minor hamstring injury and being able to move on from there. The only other real news from an IU perspective is recruiting. So you've got IU coaches on the road for the July evaluation period, the first one of those. So I know there's been a number of tweets about guys that they've watched over the last couple of days, I think with Peach Jam going and all those kinds of things. So I don't know that you're going to find any, tremendous news there. All college coaches are out watching the guys that they've prioritized and the top prospects. So the fact of who they're watching probably is not going to come as a shock to anybody. It's a bunch of guys that IU has already proven to be pretty high on and in on, but is an important part and good for them to be out, be seen, and see what happens from there. So I think that is it for Hoosier Headlines on a pretty light, early July episode. But coming up when we come back on Assembly Call Radio, we're going to discuss CJ Gunn as we continue our offseason previews. So we'll talk about him and what to expect in his sophomore season. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. We'll be back in a minute. All right. Good evening, everybody. Chat Mob, welcome. So let's see. Yeah, I'm interested in the Thomas Bryant fit in Miami as well.
It'll be good for him.
I think anytime you can. Yeah, I think he's gotten kind of flashes here and there of opportunities, and I think for an organization like that to see something in you probably says a lot. A little bit of the same, we talked about with Trace of being in a good situation of, see what he can do as a backup big there.
Yeah. No, and I think it'll be the kind of thing where early in the season, Trace is maybe getting a couple minutes a game, but if he can prove his value, they're going to play him. I mean, they're a smart organization. If guys fight and claw and are going to be out there playing hard, especially in the regular season, I don't think he'll get playoff minutes, but in the regular season, they would love for him to eat minutes from somebody else and give guys rests. I mean, they're, again, smart organization that's not going to wear their guys out. They know they're going to be there come playoff time as long as they're remotely healthy and they can make a run. I mean, look at last year. They were like not considered a contender. They got to the playoffs, got everybody right, and won a title. I mean, that's their potential every year if they're in the playoffs. They're tough to play, and those guys bring it when they have to. So I'm looking forward to that. Thomas, it's the same thing, man. If he plays the way he's capable, he's going to be on that roster. I wish he would have gotten more minutes in Denver, but when was Jokic coming off the floor? Ever. I mean, It's hard to establish yourself a rhythm when, Bam gets in foul trouble a lot for the Heat here and there. And he can play with Bam, quite frankly, because he can move out on the floor and Bam can't leave 5 feet. So, I think that's a good fit for him as well. Victor, going back to Oklahoma City, he's got some bad memories of being in Oklahoma City. It didn't go well the first time. It'd be nice for him to exercise some of those demons. But they brought him in as a veteran for those young guys. I mean, they have a very young team, and he's a former All-Star. So I think that's a pretty decent fit too if he's going to continue to play.
Yeah. Yep.
I had something coming out in the community maybe next week. I have a local guy here who's getting into basketball training. Well, he has been for several years, and he's just starting. Not starting. He's stretching out. And Rob Finnessy called him up the other day, and so I get a text from this guy. But he's asked me to stop by a couple times. I've been to his workouts, and couple Purdue guys, Butler guy, Stony Brook. It's been really interesting.
Prepping
to
for the
see.
next level or college development?
These college kids are getting ready for their next season, even when they're doing local college workouts. So
Gotcha.
they'll go do their school stuff, and then they'll come and do this guy. But he does a lot of international pros, guys that
makes sense.
aren't playing in the NBA. They'll come to him in the off season, and he'll train them. And it's just he's got a couple barns at his house, and he redid all the flooring and everything. And these guys will drive.
Okay. That might be the most Indiana sentence ever uttered on the
100%.
assembly call.
Yeah.
He's a basketball trainer, has a couple barns on his property.
I mean, sometimes the stereotypes are true. I mean, there's only,
But the thing that I took away from it is
I thought everybody had a basketball gym in their barn when I moved to Indiana. I just thought that was the way it was.
See?
These guys don't have top, they're not starters. Maybe a couple here or there, but they're D1 players that are trying to get better, and they're constantly working at their game. It's not just going to practice at your, Big Ten school and the workouts that they have for them and the strength and conditioning. If you're really serious about your craft, you're working on it a lot each day. And the talent is so – I'm watching these guys, and I'm like, yeah, you're coming off the bench at a Big Ten school. But, man, these workouts are outstanding, right?
The thing.
And so it tells you what Hood-Schifino and Trace and these guys are doing. But, man, these young guys in college are working. And if they're worthwhile, they're working and working and working. It's been a fun summer. I've been able to do that a couple times.
The most illuminating thing for me, Coach, over the past 5 to 10 years is finding out how hard the guys on the end of the bench and even the walk-ons work just to maintain, just to stay on the team. Just to stay at Indiana, and you don't see that as a fan. You hear about practice, but you're not. Sometimes now with TikTok and things like that, they're showing themselves doing that, and you're kind of like, oh wow, this works really hard. These guys are all working so hard just to stay at this level, not even to get to the next one. The next one, you've got to have that Victor work ethic. Where I remember I was around Bloomington that summer, Victor, sophomore to junior year. And we started hearing whispers of Victor's insane workouts. And there have been many articles written on that. But he was working out 5 hours a day to get better, minimum. And that was like not including weight training and all of that stuff. He was working on his game that much. Now that's maniacal. That's crazy. But that's what gets you drafted number 2 in the NBA draft. I mean, and so it is amazing how hard these kids. I remember when I went to college and was looking at possibly being a walk-on, and then I met some of the walk-ons when I was at USC, and I met some of the guys who were on the team. Those guys' workouts were lifting 40s at the end of the week. It was like that was the workout was partying and taking advantage of it. It's a different world now, man, and these kids are working so hard. They all have personal trainers. They all have that stuff, and they're doing all the workouts through the strength and conditioning program.
And boys,
so if you ever wonder how hard these guys are working, don't. They're doing a lot.
And the kids who go play overseas, man, they make some good money, but they work at their game. I mean, it's not just I'm not NBA worthy, so I'm just going to go over there and play. But they're professionals now, and they at that level. But there has been an interesting summer. I've done that a couple. My son is working for this trainer, and he's been up to Northwestern to train some guys. They go on the road and travel to places as well, trying to build up even more clients. So I have a little something coming out in the community. The filming was a little shaky, but I think it'll be good once I get it edited. So I'll have that out. But man, we need to just sit back and go, these guys work hard. They may have had a bad game, but they if they're worth it, they're working.
It's not because they're not working.
Yeah. All right, we ready to go? All right, here we go.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And of course celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Andy, you're muted.
Oh, what a shame. That was really good.
It was a
But
great intro.
It was really
It was
good. Is that
all
why?
timer, and it's lost.
It was really just fantastic. Anyway, so welcome back to the Assembly Call of Andy Bottoms here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. And before we get into our offseason preview of CJ Gunn, I want to hit a couple back home network items. One, it's going to be a new show, Right Up Meridian, which is a Pacers podcast, going to be hosted by Scott Caulfield and Tony Drania. So looking forward to that for all the Pacers fans out there. And then doing the work, a couple quick updates there. They just interviewed Amy Matheny from the 1983 Big Ten title team. I've heard good things about that. I have that on my list to try to listen to tomorrow on a work day with far fewer meetings I've had the last couple. And then on July 11th, they're interviewing freshman Lene Beaumont as well. So get a chance for Hoosier fans to get to know her a little bit prior to the season. So lots of good stuff in the off season from Jeff and Kathy as well. So appreciate them for doing that. And with that, we'll kind of shift into our main topic. Coach and I were talking about this before we came on. As you look for players to preview, returning players to preview for the upcoming season, the options are limited. We've already done Malik Renew. We'll do Trey Galloway at some point, but wanted to try to have Tony on for that one, as he did a good breakdown of him in the IU film room. So I thought it would be a good chance for him to talk through some of that. So we opted to go with CJ Gunn, and he's a guy who, as we look ahead to his sophomore season, I think will, is one of the swing players, if you will, in terms of what IU can be coming into the season, just based on what the roster looks like right now. Not a ton of experience at the shooting guard, or not a ton of depth, at least, at the shooting guard position. You've got Galloway, who seems at this point likely to start there. But CJ is going to have some opportunities. And so, as we look back to his freshman year, it's kind of a normal freshman year, I guess, in some ways, of a guy where he was ranked from a recruiting perspective. So played 10.5% of available minutes for IU. From an offensive rating standpoint, he finished at 78.8. That was quite a bit lower in conference play and against Tier A and B competition. As we look at that, I don't know that that's shocking given the types of situations he was typically in when he was coming into those games, but used 20% of possessions when he was in, with one of the higher usage rates on the team. I think, again, as a guy who typically was coming in late in games of either where IU was up or down by a decent amount, I think that's not overly shocking. The big thing that people will talk about, and rightfully so, is the shooting numbers. Got to the line 5 times, made 4 of 5 from there, which is a good sign. Shot 15 of 31 on twos, but just 2 of 24 on threes, including 0 of 10 in Big Ten play. We'll obviously talk about that because his ability to show some of the shooting prowess that he showed in high school is going to go a long way for this team this season. Assist rate just a little bit above 9. Turnover rate not outrageous by any stretch, a little bit below 10. And really, when you look, steal percentage was 4.0. That's good. We'll talk about him defensively in a minute. Got called for a decent number of fouls for 40 minutes. But again, just not a huge sample size of him. If you look at the last 14 games of the season, he played in just 2 of those games. And so if you want to look at the highlights for him from an in-game perspective, these are the 2 games where his offensive rating was over 100. One was the Elon game. The lesson here is that my mom and I should attend all games because this is when he played the best. A 133 offensive rating, played 19 minutes. IU had some guys out in that game, so he got a little bit more extended run, had 11 points, made 4 of 6 on twos, 1 of 4 on threes, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. A good all-around game from him. And that one, the other game with the over 100 offensive rating, came against Miami of Ohio, where he had 5 points, 2 assists, 2 steals, and played 18 minutes. So, again, if you're looking just at the stats, John, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that we're going to be able to draw conclusions from as a springboard as we look forward there. So let's talk offense first. Shooting for him is the key. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The numbers last year were not good. Again, we can attribute that to a number of different things. So Ryan, as you look at his shooting and kind of go back to, to look at those things, what do you attribute that to? Is it shot selection, shot form, nerves? just being a freshman, like kind of where do you come down on what led to him shooting the ball from deep the way that he did?
It's a little bit of a gumbo. It's a little bit of everything there. I think that the shot form is actually nice. I mean, you saw it in high school. It looked like he was replicating it in college. Coach can speak to that as well. It looked like he was replicating his shot form. I think being a freshman, you get sped up, especially a freshman who is, how many minutes did he average a game? I just had it pulled up. 7 minutes a game in over 20 games. Okay, so he played little more than half the season, and he averaged 7 minutes a game, which means that a lot of that was probably early in the season. He's not playing 7 minutes a game in the Big Ten. So I think that what happened is he got onto a college court. The adrenaline is flowing. You overshoot. You speed yourself up. You're not used to guys your height closing out at you that fast, your height or bigger closing out at you that fast. You rush things. Got to get the shot off. And that speeds you up. And then what happens as you settle in, you're aware that you've been sped up. And so then you're overcompensating in other ways. And so it gets in your head, especially as a shooter. And as a shooter, if you're thinking, you're missing. And so he took 24 3-pointers as a freshman and made 2 of them. And he missed a lot at the end of the season. So I really think it got in his head, and I think he got sped up. And I think that there are issues with adrenaline when you play. And this is why we always say guys get better when they play in games. I don't care how much practice you play. Practice, you can hone your skills a little bit and, find some things out about yourself. And if you're going up against a good opponent, you'll develop a little bit. But where you improve is by playing games, because a game atmosphere cannot be replicated in practice. It just can't. No matter how many times people say, no, the way we practice is like a game. No, it's not. And so I think that what happens with adrenaline a lot of times, you get out there and you're too fast. You're jumping higher than you normally would. You're releasing faster than you normally would, thinking you're doing it all the same. And then what happens is if you play a decent number of minutes, you start to come down from that and you crash way below where you normally would. And maybe because you've expended so much energy being so fired up. And this is why you see teams who come out fired up in games hit lulls where other teams come back on them. It's because you crash through that floor and then you really have to labor to pick yourself back up. And so CJ, I saw some of that with him where he just came out, just shot out of a cannon with energy. And then you could see him kind of dip below and trying to keep up with it. And then your legs are a little heavy when you're jumping. So you're not jumping as high as you normally would on your shot and all of that. So I think it's just a lot of things compounded, because if you look at the actual form and his release, it looked fine. He was just missing. And again, another factor is when you start missing as a shooter, you start aiming. And when you're aiming and thinking, you're missing. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And I think that it's something when he settles down and matures within the game, his shot will be fine. I think it'll be something to be counted on. I'm not saying he's going to shoot 40% this year, but the shot form is that of a guy who could shoot at a high level.
Coach, what did you see from him from a shooting standpoint?
I come here for all the excellent takes that Ryan has. I agree. You need game rep. Is he going to get them early? Is he going to get them at the middle of the year? Is he going to get them later in the year? That's the question. It's not that his form or his ability to score. It's you learn the college game by playing the college game. I think that's what Ryan said is why you saw the numbers. What I did like is that I didn't see him being shy. He might have at some point, as Ryan said, come down a little bit, but if the shot was there, he has an offensive mindset, which really is going to help this team. It's not this, we're just going to run stuff. Like, he wants to score. It seems like that when you watched him play. Very aggressive on the drive to the rim, in transition, getting out and running the floor and getting some buckets that way. He is an athlete. This is what, I have no idea. I cannot predict what CJ Gunn is going to do, but I'm excited because he's long, he's athletic, and he's got what I believe to be a scorer's mentality. Had it in high school.
He's not shy.
He's not shy, and you need that in college. I was talking in the break about this trainer, and he tells his guys every time you grab the ball, you're 0 for 0. Like, whether you made the last one or missed the last one doesn't matter. You got to have that mentality. I think that's potentially CJ's strength. It's just, when does he learn how to do that in the offense, in game situations, and trust his form. I think if I could add something to what Ryan said is trust your form, trust your ability. Don't try to go too fast. Don't try to wish it in. Don't try to be something you're not. Just be CJ Gunn and put the ball in the basket. But if he gets 10 to 20 minutes at some run that way off the bench, I think you're going to see numbers get better. Just how much, but I'm kind of excited about that because I love people who are aggressive with their offensive mindset, especially at the guards.
Well, let's be real. There's nothing wrong with his effort, energy, intent, energy. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, but
Nothing.
to get on the floor on this team, he's going to be able to need to do something unique, and that's going to be shoot the ball, because Caleb Banks is longer and bigger, and he's going to be more of a guy who gets in the paint and mixes things up. You know, that's not going to be CJ Gunn's thing. CJ Gunn's thing is going to have to be shooting the basketball.
Yeah, and fellas, I think.
No,
okay, go ahead. Defensively, he was the same way.
Yeah.
I don't think he was great defensively. He was handsy and fouled but he was getting up. He wanted to stop the ball, and with his length, you saw a kid who was hungry to get out on the court. If he uses that hunger in his physical workouts and his basketball workouts, and then put that with experience, there's a chance that he can really have a good bump from his freshman numbers.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was going to say. I think what you saw from him on both ends of the floor was he was trying to do stuff fast and aggressive. And sometimes that was work to his benefit, and sometimes it didn't. I think, there were times when he would come in, and I think this is true of a lot of players in that scenario, particularly early in the season. You get in some of these bye games and mop-up duty, and you're trying to put your imprint on the game to try to figure out how I'm going to get more minutes. And I think that, lack of shyness, if you will, with putting the ball up. I mean, he came in, he was ready to fire. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. I do think as he looks to expand his role on the team, have to figure out where that fits in as a guy who, in some of those late game mop-up lineups, there's not really a hierarchy of who's going to take shots. There's not really this guy's option A in this scenario. For him this year, though, his goal is to be able to play more with the starters and to put himself in some of those situations. So I think it'll be an adjustment period as well, and maybe one that helps him settle in a little bit of, hey, you're on the floor with the starters a bit more. You are not option A, B, or C more than likely. How do you transition into being a more complementary role? Maybe that's a spot-up shooter. Maybe that's some different things like that. I don't know whether that, helps or hinders his development, but I do think seeing him with a different group of players in different game situations will be somewhat revealing, even though there's still some bye games at the beginning of the season where maybe he can get his feet under him a little bit, get some confidence, which, he shoots the ball a little bit better in some of those situations last year. Be curious to know what his development looked like. I think that would go a long way to telling whether it really became mental or not, as you look at it that way. But so as we look forward, Coach, obviously everybody wants him to take this huge step forward offensively and be able to, be a more reliable shooter and scorer. What do you think is realistic from a progression standpoint? I know when you guys did the minutes breakdown, you and Jared ended up with him at about 14 minutes a game. I'm not sure there's a player with a wider range of potential minutes played than him on the team. But, as you think about what that median outcome might be, what do you think is reasonable to expect from him as fans look at it this season?
I think he's going to come off the bench, and I think, you're looking at 15, 16 minutes. If you could get 6 to 8 points a game from him, that's fantastic. And that's an average. You'll have some games that pop. But I think, what did Miller Kopp average last year? Just 7, 8, something like that? If he could – he doesn't have to replace Miller Kopp's production because Miller was a starter there. But if he could hit a couple threes a game or a three and a couple breakout fast break. When you look at those, I know the competition, and it was probably mop-up time, but Elon in Miami, he got 18 and 19 minutes, and he was productive, across the board. Rebounds, assists, steals. So again, what Ryan said is if he gets on the court, he's going to do a lot of things. He does need to fix that shooting, but I don't see why he doesn't help Indiana at the 6 to 7 points per game, playing 16, 17 minutes, and doing a lot of things across the board. I've been big this year. I think the best thing Indiana's going to do, and we don't talk about it, is rebound. I think CJ Gunn can help rebound with the way. I think Mbako can rebound. I think the rebounding of the go-get is important. So there's some skills that he provides that'll, if he can do that at the college level, and for me it's when. I have no idea when. It could be his junior year when he's ready to produce those types of minutes. It could be at the start of next year. I just think he's going to be a pretty solid player once he pops.
Yeah, I think it's what's interesting to look at is to look from January on what CJ Gunn was doing on the floor. And you see, and specifically minutes wise, 14, 9, 9, 8, 5, 1, 2, 2, 9. And that's not every game. It's really hard to play and to play well when you don't get regular minutes and you don't have a consistent set thing. A role player has to know their role. And if you don't carve out, and again, he's a freshman, so it's hard to carve out a role on a team that's trying to compete for a Big Ten championship. Spiro, that was Indiana's goal this year, was to compete for a Big Ten championship. It's hard to find a freshman a consistent role unless they're a 5-star who you have big plans for, like a Jalen Hood-Schifino. It's hard to find that consistent role for that guy. And so what he did as a freshman, it's hard to judge fully. As we said, it's a small sample size. It also is an inconsistent sample size because he'd go a week without playing and then be in for 5 minutes. And you're like, well, CJ Gunn didn't do anything. Well, yeah, of course not. He's not comfortable. And so this year is going to have to be different. And it's on the coaching staff to make him comfortable as well as it is on CJ for carving himself out that role. There's competition now. For minutes, whether it's front court guys or back court guys, there's going to be a lot of competition. And so he's got to establish himself. Now, I think he's got a leg up. He's got a year in the system, and he's shown that he can be an energy guy, shown that he can play some defense, shown that he can do some things. Now it's on him to take that next step and be able to knock down a shot when he's relied upon and make those moves. So it is he's a really interesting player coming into this year because it's untapped potential completely. I mean, he doesn't have anything as a freshman really to hang his hat on, except for that he showed energy. He showed willingness. He wasn't shy. Now he's got to do all of those things and make a positive impact, which is the step that he has to take.
We're looking to replace Tamar's production, right, in some ways. And I think CJ has a skill set of rebounding and defending that might be better than Tamar, where Tamar was probably better offensively early. But that guard off the bench is where CJ's needs to produce. And so can he get to some level of what Tamar had? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing with Tamar. When Tamar was good, he was real good. He shot that three consistently, with confidence, came off his hand great. He'd make some mistakes here and there, but when he was good, you could see how much better he made the team. CJ's got to be that guy. You're right, Coach. Hopefully more consistently.
Yeah, and I think what you saw from him, at least as you kind of project forward with what Mike Woodson likes, defensively was not something that he was known for. That was a big question mark with him in last year. And he really put forth great effort on that end of the floor. As you said, Coach, he was a little bit handsy at times, just a little bit amped up, but from a attentiveness to defense and really, trying to go out and be aggressive, put pressure on the ball and things like that, I think he set a good foundation for himself in that regard. And that, as we know, is an important way to get yourself into the rotation on a Mike Woodson coach team. So I think he set himself up there, and maybe that gives him the opportunity to get a little bit more run, to settle in a little bit, and the offense comes. And I think as a complementary piece in a lot of what, the lineups that he's going to be a part of, there certainly he will not be the focal point of opposing defenses. So if he's able to evolve a little bit, knocked out a couple shots, the opportunities will be there because of that. And I think the other thing is we kind of tie that in a little bit with some of the things that Ant Wright was talking about last week with playing Mbako at the 4. A big domino that needs to fall in some ways in order to do that is the development of CJ Gunn, so that he could potentially be the 3. He's got the length to defend that position, or Galloway could, slide over there. But it becomes hard to construct a lineup with Mbako at the 4 if you're not getting good production out of CJ Gunn, at least in stretches. Not that you want to do that all the time, but I think that's the other piece of his development that becomes important, and why he ends up being one of the real X factors on this team in terms of whether they get close to the ceiling or whether they don't. Any final thoughts? I think we hit most of the most of the key, thoughts and topics like that. Coach, I know you talked about we talked about playing time. I'll kind of throw this to you to wrap up with any other thoughts on him. You guys had him at 14 minutes a game. As you look back at doing that exercise, would you revise that? How do you see that playing out based on maybe a couple weeks to reflect on doing that?
If he develops, those minutes are going to go up. I mean, that's kind of a simple answer, a Mr. Obvious answer, right? But I think if Indiana is to be as successful as possible, I think those minutes need to be higher, because then that means he brings that shooting aspect, right? If not, you're searching for those combinations of guys to find. And, I'm not saying if he gets less minutes than that, Indiana's going to struggle. But I think he is a component. We just don't know how much he's going to grow this summer in the collegiate game. If he grows fast and can provide some scoring off the bench, I think it helps Indiana, and those minutes will go up, and you'll see probably Trey, his minutes drop a little bit. And if you do go to a smaller lineup, maybe he gets, the 15 through 17, 18 minutes, those extra 3 or 4 minutes at the 3, the old traditional 3. So I would I'd keep it there. I think that's fair with where he performed last year. But boy, I'd like to see that go up given his skill set. But he's got to earn it, and we won't know that until, November.
Yep. Ryan, final thoughts on CJ as you look ahead to the season?
I think there's a lot of upside there over the next 3 years, not just this year, but over the next 3 years. And I think the first step to that is establishing himself as a really nice bench player this year. Because, look, if you can shoot the ball at his size, at what is he, 6'5", if you can shoot the ball at his size in the Big Ten, you can go a long way. You can be a very key piece to a very good team. And then you build from there. And I think this is a guy who, if he has a good sophomore year, could be a starter his junior year as the guy who comes off of screens, hits threes, plays solid defense, makes himself bigger than he is on both ends of the floor. But he's got to be able to take that next step and just provide valuable minutes. And I think that there was value in what he provided last year, just from an energy standpoint. Now you've got to add that added value of production, get that part of it. And then you start taking that next step in your career. This year is going to be a great testing ground to see what CJ Gunn can become. Can he settle into the college game? And if he does that, I really think there's a good trajectory for him at Indiana to be a really key player down the road.
Yeah, I think you're right. It'll be important to just see what does his growth curve look like? How much of a step forward does he take as you start projecting him as a guy who really always, from the beginning of coming into IU, projected as a fair guy that you look to build over time. It's just a matter of how steep that curve gets.
Take those steps. You actually have to take the steps. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And so I think he's a guy to really, as you start thinking about things to watch at the beginning of the season, we'll all be excited about the team and getting to see this iteration of the team. But he's a guy really in particular to look at, and can he build some confidence over the first handful of games that'll springboard him into the rest of the season? I think those first few games are really, really critical for him, and he's going to get opportunities in those games. So just as you're thinking about, storylines other than, how much did they win by against some of these teams or different things like that, his play is a guy to really watch as, potentially is there a sign of what we're going to get from him over the course of the season. So, all right, well, that'll do it for our preview of CJ Gunn. Certainly a guy we'll be looking at quite a bit this upcoming season. But coming up next on Assembly Call Radio, it's mailbag time. We got a few great questions from you, and we'll answer them all next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
Something we didn't mention is he's the lead front runner for those Tamar minutes. You got
really
two freshmen coming. You got Cups and Newton, right? And Leal. Those are the guys who could challenge.
Well, and
him
you don't
for
know.
Those spots, right?
Newton's been cleared, but you don't know how aggressively he's going to be able to play early and things like that. So
there's a little pressure on him to step up to those Tamar minutes.
Really, and look, it's getting to the point with the players that IU has been able to bring in. If you don't step up, somebody else will do it for you, and they'll step over you. And that's really, this isn't Archie Miller's, recruiting thing where you got 3 years of string to figure something out. This is, you got to play and you got to step up. And I think CJ has got a great attitude. I do. I think that he recognizes what the issues were last year, it seems, just based on who I've talked to. And he, he came in with a great attitude. He was always in with energy. He never slumped his shoulders. He's aggressive. All of those things. It's just a matter of converting that energy into production. Which is the hardest thing. Which is the hardest thing for kids in college to do. You can have a good attitude, you can have energy, you can have athleticism, but turning that into actual production is what separates guys who wind up out and guys who wind up, succeeding. So,
both of those guys, CJ and Banks, came in and didn't hesitate. Like they were all over the place. Banks rebounding and tipping the ball and getting hustle plays, and that's what gives me some excitement about both of those guys. And you're absolutely right. You got to produce. You can't just run around and get rebounds and tip.
For sure.
You've got to do some things on the defensive side and on the offensive side in order to earn that. But they could have, I'm a freshman and not be ready. Their number got called and just go in and, I'm only going to get 2 or 3 minutes. But I think they made the most out of their minutes from that energy standpoint. And now it's skill that has to be displayed.
It's converting. I mean, it's just converting that energy to positive, positional basketball and fulfilling it. Because there's good players on this team now, man. There's gonna be times that Gabe Cupps is in there off the ball. There's gonna be, and there's times that he'll be in there with Trey Galloway at the backcourt, and CJ's gonna have to carve out his minutes.
Yep. All right, guys, ready to hit these few questions and
let's do it.
Yep.
Go from there. All right,
here we go.
I'll try not to be any at this time.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Hi, I'm Andy Bottoms here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips, and you're listening to Assembly Call Radio. And now it's time for our mailbag. These questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about and join at assemblycall.com/community. Guys, not unlike the Hoosier headlines, a little bit light on questions this week, but we do have a few good ones here. First one from JD DeFries. What is an off-season IU basketball storyline that no one is talking about that you think is important for the future of the program? Ryan?
Wait, say that again. It cut out.
What is an off-season IU basketball storyline that no one is talking about that you think is important for the future of the program?
Oh, wow. I think people are talking about it, but maybe not enough, is just how many guys in the 24 and 25 class they are getting on campus and recruiting very hard. And I think people are talking about it. I think that people like us talk about it, but I don't think nationally it's getting any attention. Indiana is in on more players for the next 2 recruiting classes than anybody. Now, do they get any of those guys? No. I mean, no. Did they get all those guys? I mean, no. But they could get a few of them, and I think that elevates IU as a program. But I do think that's an interesting storyline to watch over the next few weeks. Just where this goes with those recruitments, because those guys are going to start committing pretty soon, and it's really going to be telling for the direction of the program. Can they start snagging some of these guys on the longer recruitments? Because Indiana's success has been in short burst recruitments, the transfer portal, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, and that's it. So can they win some of these long ones? Will be very telling for the future of the program.
Coach, what about you?
Well, I have a couple, and I don't know if one's really a storyline, but more of a question is, I think this is an important year with the roster turnover to find some success because it's going to be a with the transfer portal, are we a program that can change 6-7 guys, bring 6-7 guys in and continue to advance the program? I think, I don't think you have to go and be a 4 seed necessarily to advance, but we don't want to take a step back because of the continuity. The talent is there, but there's a lot of questions on this team. So I'm not sure that's a storyline. More of a question for me is how are our coaching staff and our players going to do without Trace Jackson, without Grace Thompson, some of those guys that brought the program along. I think this is a big year, and it's important because you don't want to have a roller coaster program. You want to keep building. So if that's a storyline but more so than that, the number of Indiana guys that are coming back to play for Woodson. And again, I have been very cautious with Mike Woodson, but boy, he seems to have a lot of players recruiting that are paying attention to him. But when you get Calvert back and when you get Hulls back, I just think that speaks that the program is doing a lot of things well. And it gets talked about when Calvert has a, media availability or someone gets hired. But I really think that this program has been built to continue to be successful. And that class that Ryan talked about is going to be huge in that next big step of quality players. Mike Woodson needs talent. He coaches better when he has talent. And I know that's, again, another Mr. Obvious. Every coach does, right? But there are some coaches that can really, take teams that aren't as talented and win. But Mike Woodson needs to win the recruiting, and so we'll be interested to see that. But I think it's very important to get these guys that have played at Indiana, respect Coach Woodson. I think that then helps in the recruiting and the on-the-court coaching as well.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, this all, any avenue you take on this one probably ties back to recruiting in some form or fashion. For me, I guess I'll talk and a little bit of this goes with some of the CJ Gunn conversation, but to me, it's kind of the development of the maybe less heralded recruits that I got on the roster. So whether that's a Gabe Cupps, whether that's Caleb Banks, whether that's CJ Gunn, what kind of roles do those guys carve out? Because getting them to be part of the foundation allows you to know what swings you need to take from a recruiting standpoint, where your priorities really lie, what you have at key positions, especially in the backcourt, where there really is not a ton of depth on this team. But if you are able to see Cupps show enough that, hey, he can be, he can be a foundational piece. You see Gunn take a step. He can be a guy that we can count on here. And then you work to surround those guys with some of these top end recruits and already know that you've got valuable role players. All that goes back to building a program. All that goes back to, what you need to do and what you need to accomplish in recruiting and things that you can show people who may not be as highly regarded from a recruiting standpoint, but to be able to continue to tell that story of player development and some of those kinds of things. So, those are really two guys. I think the front court depth, it's hard to think that something's not going to work out there. Whether the players are not exactly, the guys that you think are going to get the minutes may not be that way. I think there's enough options there where you feel pretty good about that part of the team. I think for me, it's the backcourt. You've got X coming back from injury. Cupps has to step up and be the guy behind him. You've got Galloway likely the starting two guard, unless something happens here in the next handful of weeks. But Gunn is a critical swing player. And so I think not only do those guys have the chance to really help this year, but it's also what they mean for the future that is as important in some ways and kind of helps you, coach, as you talk about, figure out, okay, we're going to be a perennial tournament team. You're going to do all those things. You need those kinds of guys to hit and to do well and to develop in order to do that. All right, next one from Jim Tom Hoosier. Do you think there will eventually be tweaks to the transfer portal rules? What do you think those changes might be? I think, Ryan, I feel like some changes came out somewhat recently, or at least some proposed changes. So you might be closer to that than me. But I'll kind of let you give an update on that. And if you think there's anything else that might be coming down the pipe in terms of portal changes.
Well, they've created windows now for transfers where you got to announce your transfer. I don't think you have to transfer by a certain date, but you have to enter by a certain date, and then it stops and it closes, and then you commit. And then there's another window open. That's kind of standardizing it a little. I think they may tweak those dates a little bit based on when the season ends and the NCAA tournament and all of that stuff. Because I think some people were unhappy that the teams that were currently still alive in the tournament had to come from behind in a lot of those recruitments. It's not fair to the teams that do well and make the tournament, to not be able to have those players in because they're focused on actually playing games. And they also, it's up for grad transfers. You can transfer at any time if you're a graduate student, and you can commit anytime if you're a graduate student. So that will always be that way because those guys don't have a connection to any school. They're graduates. But yeah, I think that you might see some schedule tweaking on that stuff, like when the window opens, when it closes, things like that. I don't know if you're going to see any more restrictions. They could say something like, you can only take 2 transfers a year or something like that. But I think that would be unfair because your whole roster can transfer away if it wants to, so you've got to be able to fill in that roster. I think any of those restrictions would cause problems. So I don't see any other ways they could do it other than minor tweaks. And really, I haven't heard any good ones. Some people have said like, your first year at a school, you can't take an NIL deal or something. It's like, why? That doesn't seem fair. Like, yeah, I mean, like recruits are able to take whatever they want when they show up on campus. Is any different for a transfer? So I don't know. I think the one thing that might happen is right now you're seeing guys declare for the draft and enter the portal. There might be, maybe put something on that. Like you can either declare for the draft or enter the portal. But if you declare for the draft and come back, you got to go back to your school, then enter the portal. You got to make a decision by this date, and sort of change that a little, because there were a lot of teams left in limbo, both that wanted to recruit those guys, their current school, and, whether or not they're going to make their NBA decision. So you're really holding a lot of people hostage with one move. So I could see that maybe get tweaked in some way. Like by this day, you have to decide if maybe make the draft declaration day earlier or make the transfer portal day a certain time or something like that. I could see that. Other than that, there's really, these kids are allowed to go wherever they want and they're allowed to leave. And as long as that's the case, they can't put a whole lot of restrictions on them. So we've seen it for years in professional sports, player empowerment. And now it's made its way to college sports. And this is the new reality. Players are going to have the power because without them, none of this exists. And people want to watch good players. And if you kick out all of the best players because they do things like transfer or they want NIL deals or whatever, you're going to get a worse product. And that is not what TV deals want.
Coach, any tweaks you'd like to see or anything you want to add here?
The only thing, and I've come a long way in favor of the players over the transfer portal and the NIL, but some of these guys seem to be transferring 3 or 4 times. And I guess there's, if the coach leaves and all that kind of stuff that in play, but maybe, if you transfer in your first 4 years, you can't grad transfer. I don't know. But again, you're limiting the number of transfers. There has to be some rule or these guys can jump ship. But you've seen some guys that have played on 3 or 4 basketball programs over the year of their eligibility. And I don't quite get that. And again, I don't want to be the old man, get off my lawn. I do think there are reasons why a player goes to a university and needs to move to a different place. But then, you got to think about it too. And if you want to move now or do you want to possibly move later, I think that's part of, your job. So the only concern that I have remaining with the transfer portal is simply, it just seems like some of these guys are transferring more than the once and the grad transfer. They're sneaking in a third or a fourth. And again, if it's the player who benefits from a family issue or whatever, obviously I would be in favor of that for the player. But there have been a lot of those players who have done that, and I'd like to see that stop. I do think it'll just calm down a little bit at some point. It's all new still, but it's just changed basketball, I think, probably for the good. So not a whole lot of messing around for me.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, Ryan touched on standardizing the windows and some of the timelines a little bit to at least not make it last so long as you're trying to figure some of that out. I think, you see some of what they've done with just regular recruiting in terms of how they've, really reshaped what some of those windows are and are not. So I could see them maybe doing something similar there. And then, Coach, to your point, I think the hard part with some of that is, if you introduce any level, we've seen this because the way that worked before, when everybody would apply for a waiver and whatever, if you introduce any level of subjectivity where you're asking the NCAA to make decisions and then make them consistently in line with past precedent they set, you're probably setting yourself up to be disappointed. So I think you got to figure out how to do some of that where you do have, the family situation. Then people are like, well, this person abused this because they didn't really have whatever. I think you run into some of those things and it just gets hard to say. You either draw this line in the sand and say, these are the only things that you can do. But I think any room for interpretation with the NCAA is a a ticking time bomb, unfortunately. So it's like you got to figure out ways to do that in a way. And I agree with you. You get some guys, it's a little bit different. You run into the last few people that have some of these COVID years and stuff left, but it's like you got these dudes who are like 25, 26 years old. I would have probably enjoyed staying in college for that long as well if I could. But you run into some of these situations, and it's like maybe there's a story to tell with every transfer and the guy who's played at 4 schools. Maybe there's a perfectly valid reason for it, but it does kind of hit you weird when you see it and be like, how is this guy still in school? And 2, how is this guy transferred this many times to do that? But it gets a little tricky, I think, to actually administer some of the restrictions that you might put around that. But all right, we'll finish with this one from Drew Patterson. If you could guarantee one of the following for next season, the others could still happen, but only one is guaranteed, which would you choose and why? All right, number 1, Kel'el Ware improves his 3-point percentage to 34%. Number 2, Malik Renew reduces his fouls to 3 per 40 minutes. Number 3, CJ Gunn improves his 3-point percentage to 34%. Or number 4, Trey averages 4+ 3-point attempts per game.
I have thoughts.
All right, Coach, which one are you taking?
I'm going to take the CJ improves the 3-point percentage to 34, and I'm going to explain it this way. 1, you want Malik to reduce his fouls, but I think we got a couple backups that can play for him if needed. I do. Number 1 was the one I wanted to stretch the floor. I'm a big believer in the 4s and 5s stretching the floor. But if he gets to 33%, he's going to be able to do that because you're going to have to go out and guard him. So I cut that off right at 34.
I like
33.6%.
I like that your alternative was him just being 1% lower. I
love that,
1% lower.
Well, I have a technicality too that's going to.
I don't mind Trey shooting, but Trey's there for a lot of other reasons than 3-point shooting. So I'm going to go with if CJ hits 34%, then he's going to get some run off the bench. He's going to add to the scoring threat, and that's going to help Indiana. But man, number 1 is intriguing to me. 1 and 2 are hard to say no to.
All right. Ryan apparently has a technicality, so I look forward to hearing
first of all, there are only 2 valid answers. It's 2 and 4. Malik reduces his fouls to 3 over 40, and Trey hits 4+ 3-pointers a game. Here's why: because it says
it's not hits 4+, it's attempts 4+.
Oh, attempts. I'm sorry, then I missed that. No, then 2 is the only one that matters. Because if Trey goes back to shooting 20%, I don't care how many threes he takes again. I want it to be less. So no, but the technicality on 1 and 3 is it doesn't say how many attempts on that percentage. So if CJ's shooting 1 a game and hitting 34%, so I think it's keeping Malik
per volume.
Okay, if we're saying for volume, then yeah, Kel'el and CJ hitting 3s is huge. That's not specified. I would say keeping Malik on the floor is going to be huge for this team because he's a pure low post threat, whereas Kel'el's an inside out guy, and Malik. Him getting into rhythm, I think, offensively is going to be so important. And we saw so many times where he just couldn't because he kept fouling. So that's my initial answer. If we're saying there's volume on the other 2, I would say Kel'el shooting 34, 100%, because that just moves the floor. It stretches the floor. It allows you to do so much more. You can pick and pop with him, and that opens things up for Malik inside. It opens the wing for other guys. So, yeah, I would say if we're talking volume, I'll say number 1 with Coach. But if we're not, and we're just saying they're going to shoot 34%, I think it's keeping Malik on the floor as much as possible and let him get into rhythm.
Yeah, my answer was the Ware one. I didn't put quite as much thought into it, apparently, as you guys did to try to figure out what the.
I mean, this is our job, Andy. We take it seriously.
I'm sorry that I don't. I guess, but I think for all the reasons that you said, Ryan. I mean, if Ware is able to step out and shoot that adds a level of versatility to his game and IU's potential of what they can do offensively, whether that's opening things up for Renew inside or really just opening up driving lanes in general with him being able to do that. Because I think that's a skill when you compare him to the other bigs. While we can say there's depth there, he's the one that seems certainly most likely to display that skill. Renew's shown a little touch, but feels like a stretch for him to really step out and do a ton of that. And that's not who Sparks is. And so, I think that's just something that he can provide that other guys may not be able to within the front court. So I'll take that one. I think the Renew one is is interesting. You probably get into some technicalities on that one as well, just in terms of like, it's a per 40-minute deal. He could end up with 4 fouls every game, and I guess that's not true, but I think you can still get good production out of him even if he doesn't get to that level, and you have other guys that you could play in the front court potentially. I guess is probably the easiest way to say that one. The CJ one is interesting. My initial answer was where, and then as we kind of talked through the stuff with CJ tonight, I was like, I don't know, maybe that is more important because it unlocks some of that lineup versatility that we talked about. But I'll stick with where. I think the Galloway one, because it's attempts, is maybe a harder one to get behind because you don't really know what that means. Now, if you say he attempts that many and maintains the level of shooting that he showed last year, that becomes pretty important and really solidifies the shooting guard position if he's going to end up playing, a ton of minutes there. But I'll go with where. But that was a really good question.
Drew, congratulations. That was an excellent question.
And a great one to end on.
Well played.
So, all right. Well, that will do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing our music, and thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logos, and thank you for listening.
Take it from me, Jordan Halls. Keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
That's it. We're done. No more questions. All right. I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, the show's over. Here I come, Coach Tonsoni.
And there you have it.
Always a classic.
Absolutely.
Got some questions about the room real quick. I'm renovating the man cave. We're putting in some new flooring, painting, moving some of the memorabilia around. So I have been moved up to my son's old room, which is the St. Louis Cardinals decor. So the walls on the sides are blue. This room will be painted as soon as I get back to the man cave. So we're doing some renovations.
How dare
at the
you?
house.
I like
Indiana room.
I like that Jen's note in the chat. They aren't questions, they're accusations. So just, fantastic.
Perfect.
All right. Well,
good show, fellas.
Gents, yeah. So we'll figure out next week. Probably another off-season player preview would be my guess. Likely to
probably
be
Banks, right?
Galloway or Banks, I would imagine. As we think about that. So I'm going to assume that'll be on the agenda. Though who knows? Something else may come up as well. So always good talking to you guys, and we will talk to everybody next week.
Later, guys.
All righty. See you guys.
All right. Thanks. See you.